Okay, looks like we're live.
Welcome everybody to the Insane Asylum. Today's live show, unfortunately, Mark's not here. As you can see. We are. I hope I get this
right. Mike Huberty, I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Joe. In the having a little trouble hearing you through the microphone. I don't know if you want to, if you can switch your mic or something like that to.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
That's it's a little bit louder, but there's a lot of interference coming through, so I'm not sure if there's a setting. If you go down to the cam mic settings, if you can try a. No worries. If anybody's watching out there, it looks like we're live. How you doing? I'm Mike from See on the Side podcast, from American Ghost Walks, and from the band Sunspot. I love talking about paranormal stuff, and these guys sound like paranormal investigators, and so that's what we love talking about. So hopefully get all the audio issues fixed, and we can have a conversation. But until then, you can see I'm talking to you from my lovely study at home, which is a green screen over there. Had to convert it to like a makeshift studio, and a microphone here and guitar back there so that we can have can put on shows kind of thing. Love to do. So
Can you hear me any better?
yeah, I was still getting a little interference, but now I can hear you. And the interference isn't as bad. So
I hope it stays that way. Sorry about that. Tech issues is always a bad thing in the business. Very.
so as long as you talk right into the microphone, I think I can get you.
Okay, I'll try to keep doing that.
Sure.
Yeah, my partner couldn't make it because he still had a delivery, but yeah, we do paranormal investigations, and you do too as well, don't you? Ghost walks, tours, right?
Yes. So I own a company called American Ghost Walks, and we have haunted history tours right now in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Madison. We're not running in Milwaukee and Madison yet. Obviously, this is an unusual time in the world. Yeah. And so we're not, but Lake Geneva we've been running, Minneapolis and St. Paul we're holding off for a little bit, but Stillwater, Minnesota is going. So we've got currently 9 different cities where we run haunted history tours, mostly in Wisconsin, Minnesota, but we've expanded to Puerto Rico too. And that's just because I love writing ghost tours. My sister started the one in Milwaukee about 13 years ago, and then now we work together. So that she can focus on her like writing and researching, and she actually just finished researching a Hawaii tour, and hopefully we'll have a Maui tour coming up as soon as travel returns to Hawaii.
Yeah, whenever that might be.
Right, hopefully soon. Hopefully, I mean things are opening up slowly but surely, and so we'll just wait and see. And as soon as the states go up, then so are we.
So. Your family was doing this first, though, right? Before you, like the investigating and ghost stories and all of that.
Well, we were always into ghost stories growing up. So, whenever we'd see anything on TV as kids, like you didn't have paranormal reality television like you do now. I mean, obviously, you didn't have obviously the Travel Channel is the all paranormal channel now. Yeah, right. There's so we grew up in the Milwaukee area. In a town called Big Bend, Wisconsin, which is the way outer burbs or whatever, tiny town where most of the people, like nobody works there. Most people go to work in Waukesha or Milwaukee. And so, but we get the Chicago radio stations. And so I listen to WGN from Chicago. Every Halloween they would have Richard Crow. And he started ghost tourism kind of in Chicago. And he would talk about the investigations and finding legends and all that kind of thing. And so that kind of inspired us to be like, you know what, there's awesome stuff happening in Chicago. And we wanted to see what was the awesome stuff happening in the places where we were. And so that's what made it exciting.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of that growing up. I mean, we had three networks and Saturday morning cartoons, go outside and
Sure. You're gonna have to talk right into the microphone because I'm still having trouble. It sounds very soft, and it's more interference than it is an actual thing there. Sorry if there's.
I don't know what could happen. My computer could be just a little hot and causing issues.
Okay, that sounds better now. Okay. So, right there. So now I can hear you, and there's a little less interference. Okay, cool.
Great. So then you do this, and I've watched a couple episodes, and one that I really kind of like. And excuse me for the bad memory, but you're Wendy is your co-host of the See You on the Other Side podcast, right? From Sunspot. Yes.
So Wendy and I and our guitar player Ben have been playing together since 1996. 1996 is when we started the band.
It sounds real good. I like the music.
Thank you. And a few years ago, we decided that we were going on tour and going to locations that had haunted stories anyway. And so something like, it's part of the way we bonded actually. Where Wendy and I, so Ben and I had gone to high school together. We were in the dorms when we came to a school in Madison here at the University of Wisconsin. And Ben knew Wendy through the Milwaukee Youth Symphony, and so she was staying in a different dorm, and they were friends, but then I became friends with her too. And we would sit there and tell each other like alien stories and talk about Coast to Coast AM and stuff like that in the dorm, and kind of bonded over that even before we were playing music together. And so having the podcast where we talk about these paranormal things is like a natural extension of what we were doing. The dorm room conversations that are fun when you're 20 years old, where you can talk about the big questions, right. What's out there? What happens to us when we die? What's the meaning of everything? Is there a higher power? Are there aliens messing with their life? Are there machinery elves? Is Terrence McKenna right about the people playing with it? Like all that kind of stuff. You're exploring bigger ideas, and it's fun to talk to other people about those things and then write music inspired by it. And so that's what we've been doing for now the past several years, and just having a great time, meeting people, playing at paranormal conventions. We've had a chance to play at paranormal conventions in like 5 or 6 different states, and like meet a whole new audience from the usual rock and roll audience that we'd meet in like our 20s, playing in dives and punk rock clubs and all that kind of stuff. It's a whole new kind of audience, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet it would be. Getting out and meeting. I mean, we went out last year. We met a couple of people, like other paranormal investigators.
So where's your favorite place to investigate? Where do you guys like to go? I mean, you mentioned Sanitarium Hill in Madison. So what?
That was one of our very first places because I kind of grew up sliding down that hill in the 70s and the 80s.
All right, cool.
In the winter time, because it's a big hill, you just had to be careful not to fly in Northport Drive. And it is a spooky place.
And anybody out there, we're talking about this place in Madison that if you're not familiar with it, it's called Sanitarium Hill. It's actually one of the places you can still go to right now. That most places are closed going inside.
Right, you can't go inside this building now.
No, but what I mean is as far as you can go to the park that surrounds it, the graveyard, all that kind of stuff.
Right. You can go to all the property, it's public land.
Yeah, and so what used to be the tuberculosis sanitarium. So we think by a sanatorium kind of thing. It's not like crazy people were running
Right.
around.
It wasn't a mental hospital. It was for TV patients.
The mental hospital is Mendota Mental, and that's where Ed Gein went.
Right. Right.
And here's a funny story that my sister tells. She she had a psychology teacher at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and that teacher was talking about when she was a psychology student, they would go to Mendota Mental to volunteer at these dances. So they have dances on Saturday nights every once in a while, Mendota Mental, and they have these dances. And she goes, there was this old guy I used to dance with, and he was the most polite person in the world, and we would just have a dance together. And then he'd say, thank you very much. Very gentlemanly, very gentle. And then she found out that she was slow dancing with Ed Gein.
Yeah, well, see, when all that went on, though, in Plainsfield, nobody had a clue what he was doing until he got caught.
Right.
I don't think there was ever an exact body count of graves that he robbed, and I don't think they ever determined exactly the extent of his crimes over the years.
Well, and the thing is, okay, now I'm not defending Ed Gein here, please. But he's the inspiration behind the Norman Bates character in Robert Bloch. And Robert Bloch was living in Milwaukee, so he's a Milwaukee author. Writes the book. Psycho becomes the movie, which then becomes a sensation, obviously in 1960. And the Norman Bates character goes on. I mean, he's just like a Psycho 2, Psycho 3. He's a mass murderer in all these movies. Now Ed Gein killed a couple people, so obviously he's a sicko and all those kind of things, and dug up the bodies and the weird nipple belts, and his Slayer wrote a song about him called Dead Skin Mask, where they have like a child's voice say, "Oh, Mr. Gein," he wasn't a child killer. I mean, he still was a killer, still was crazy, still dug up bodies and things like that. But I think the shocking thing about Ed Gein's crimes weren't necessarily that he was so prolific in murder, but that they were just so far out there. The skinning the bodies he's then the woman's suit that they said he was trying to make, right? The skin of the bodies and then go into sewing it together. That's the inspiration behind Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. So Ed Gein is the gift that keeps on giving.
He was also the inspiration apparently behind Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, yeah. Sure, no, absolutely. Toby Hooper himself, Toby Hooper is an interesting character because he goes, Texas Chainsaw Massacre makes him into like a celebrity director, goes out, he's working on Poltergeist, and the idea of people still have these legends about Poltergeist, that was a cursed set. And the people who worked on it.
Because the little girl passed away.
Yes. But Toby Hooper is another interesting kind of director that he'd worked on these different haunted sets and stuff. And but anyway, Ed Gein, you can still visit his grave in Plainfield. I think I haven't visited his grave. I've been to Plainfield a bunch. I haven't gone on any dark tourism in Plainfield, but I'd like to eventually.
Yeah, I heard they don't necessarily talk too much about them.
Of course, it's a town. A small town. Who's going to be like, our most famous resident was Ed Gein? Like, they don't, in the late 1980s, Married with Children had an episode where they go to Florida, and they go to this tiny town in Florida. If you guys remember Married with Children, it was Al Bundy and Peg Bundy, and it was a silly thing. So they go to this small town in Florida, and it's this 2-part murder mystery episode.
I remember that.
Right. And so there's such a small town, and they find out that the serial killer in this small town is also their local celebrity, because they say it was the man who met Andy Griffith. And the sheriff at the end, when he's going to pick up, when he's going to take the guy to jail, he's like, "Oh, this town's only got 2 things. It's got a serial killer and the man who met Andy Griffith." He's like, We can lose one, but we'll be damned if we're going to lose both.
Right. Right.
So just, silly things that, these inspirations. But, I really like talking to people about the real life inspirations behind movies and films and stuff. I find that really fascinating because the ideas and even you find out that Wes Craven had read an article in the New York Times about these Southeast Asia. So the Hmong people came over because the Hmong were on the U.S. side in Vietnam, and once the South Vietnamese lost the war to the North Vietnamese, we had to bring over a ton of Hmong to the U.S. because otherwise the North Vietnamese were going to kill them for siding with the U.S. And they were a cultural group inside of Vietnam. And so there was, one of the big resettlement places was Fort McCoy in Wisconsin. And so that means that, so La Crosse, Wisconsin right now has a huge Hmong population. Madison is a fairly large Hmong population. Twin Cities have a huge amount of Hmong. But so do some of the other relocation places were in Southern California. And what was happening were these Hmong, young, healthy men were dying in the middle of the night. And they couldn't figure out, like, it's like they died, like they were having a dream, and they died like from a nightmare. And they were trying to figure out why young, healthy men were having this kind of a sudden, they call it like sudden nocturnal death syndrome. Sudden, unexpected nocturnal death syndrome. And so he wrote about it in the New York Times. And then Wes Craven read that. And then he put it into his hopper for later. He's like, that's really, and that became Nightmare on Elm Street. And, this real life inspiration. And so, but the Hmong people, they, one of the superstitions, like, because they've been in this Southeast Asia and they had a connection to the land for so long, when they had relocated to the United States, they couldn't properly do the rituals. Like they were, a lot of it was in dormitories, staying at a place like Fort McCoy. You couldn't do the proper religious rituals that were supposed to keep your family and you safe. Right. And they said that these nocturnal spirits, the Dao Cho, could come in the middle of the night and hurt you. And so that was this idea that they had this, like, because they couldn't perform their religious rituals in the correct way, they left themselves exposed to these spirits. And that was this, this is spreading through the community, this idea that the Dao Cho were coming because we couldn't, perform the religious rituals. And then now you have a paranormal influence behind a mystery that then becomes something as famous as Freddy Krueger.
Right.
And
that's one of those movies that's on.
Right. And that's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy exploring, because it gives us all these kind of connections between cultures, between fiction and then between reality. And that's the kind of stuff that we like to talk about on the show and then write songs about, because it's great fodder. The paranormal is great fodder for making art and music and all that kind of thing. And so you grew up in Madison.
Well, I grew up, in Madison, Oregon, Wisconsin, of course.
Right on.
Yeah, pretty much Madison.
And so when I'm in, since we run a ghost walk in Madison, and we do one on campus, as well as the Capitol Square and State Street kind of area. Right. So, so you have the stories about the Sanitarium Hill. Now, what other places, like growing up, did you have an interest in this kind of stuff where you were like, what people would talk about in certain places, and then you'd be like, we got to go check them out?
When I was growing up, one of the places, I lived right across from Forest Hill Cemetery, and there was always strange things going on over there when we were kids, because we go play that close to the graveyard.
So, Forest Hill is the place on Speedway, right?
Speedway Road. I didn't live. I spent most of my younger days right across the street. My family owned a good portion of that land, and then Crouchball, it's now Press Funeral Home.
Yes.
Fauci, it used to be Fauci's many years ago. They bought the rest of the land from my great-great-grandfather or something like that.
Okay.
So they
And
used
that's
to-
that's also right near. So people who are wondering where it is, that's also right near Madison West High School.
Right, right. It's not too. It's a big cemetery. It's supposedly the oldest one there. But yeah, we were told that's good playing over there, but we did. We go play Ghost in the Graveyard, and there'd only be a few of us because we're just cousins, man. And we'd get spooked because we'd see shadows, and there's only like 3 or 4 of us over there, and we were seeing a lot more than that, especially when we were all right close. It's like, let's get back to Granny's house quick, before something gets us. But my dad was kind of like one of these persons that like to exaggerate things and say, you can't go over there, this will get you, that'll get you. But, I never really knew about a lot of the places in Madison. I started getting into this more as I got older, and then I was investigating the stuff that was in smaller towns outside of Madison.
Sure.
Myself, I was like fascinated. I still am, because I'm still determined to figure this one out, is the Beast of Bray Road.
Yes. Well, I mean, Linda Godfrey, obviously, she's a fantastic author.
Yes, she is.
And Linda's super fun. But so the Beast of Bray Road, for you guys out there, so this is happening, and I remember this on television. And so, and it's funny when we talk to people about this, because they're like, well, what got you interested in the paranormal? Like, well, I was always interested in ghost stories, and I'd always, read the books in the library, the school. But also, we had a couple of things happen in the late 80s in Wisconsin that I think it really influenced a lot of people. And one was the haunting in Horicon, the Tallman House, because it became famous when it was on Unsolved Mysteries. But before it was on Unsolved Mysteries, it was on the local news. Right. And so you'd go and you'd see this thing they talk about. It's a haunting in Horicon, Wisconsin, and like the TV artist would make a how usually in court, because they weren't allowed to bring TV cameras into court back then, and so they would make they do a court drawing, like a picture of somebody in court. But now that person was doing pictures of ghost stories that they were getting from Horicon. We were watching that on the news, and then a year or two after the Tallman haunting, there's the Beast of Bray Road, and people are seeing what they describe as a werewolf, a giant wolf on 2 legs with glowing red eyes on this road, this in tiny town, Elkhorn, Wisconsin, southeast. It's near the Illinois border, and it's about less than a half an hour from where I grew up. And you're seeing that on the news, right. And they're saying that, and people called the police. They didn't email to a frickin' blog. They called the cops when they thought they saw a giant wolf man. Right. They were scared for their lives. And so this makes national news. Inside Edition covers like tabloid kind of stuff. But then Linda Godfrey makes her entire career where she's a cartoonist and an author, a local newspaper,
That's local newspaper.
And then as she's the one going to the police station, collecting the stories, writing all these things up, and ends up, this is the moment that defined her career, where now she's a paranormal author and a famous cryptid researcher. And when you talk to Linda about it, it's funny. She's like, I just wanted to be a cartoonist. Yeah. But instead, with her chance of making cartoons about the Beast of Bray Road. And so people are seeing this. And then you find out that there's different reports of large dogman style sightings, or bipedal canines, huge dogs walking on 2 legs in the area going back to the 1930s.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it dated back to 1936 if I'm not mistaken.
And so have you been to Bray Road?
Yes, I have. It's a very long, dark, and dreary looking road. There's no street lights. No lighting. You don't even really get glow from house lights because they're so few and far in between that you see the houses.
Really, so this is the last time I visited there was after Sunspot. We played a show in Delavan, in like the main, like, so Delavan has like a little band shell downtown. So we play a show downtown in Delavan at the band shell, the park. And then Wendy and I were like, okay, before we had, because it was like an early show, like 7 o'clock. So we still had time to go out and go bar or something. And we're like, but let's go to Bray Road and get some pictures before we go out. And it was fun to just go down there and explore, and also to see, because she hadn't been down there yet, the area that you're like, Bray, this is a really interesting. It feels like the middle of nowhere, even though you can get there maybe 5 minutes from the freeway. It feels like the middle of nowhere, right?
Right. Yeah, it does. I mean, I can easily see how that place can really play tricks on you.
Yeah, and so that so it's an interesting place, but one of the things that I think is really interesting about Bray Road is because I always thought of it as a cryptid kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So not necessarily some kind of devil beast or whatever, but a cryptid.
Right.
And then when they made that Bray Road Beast movie last year, so Small Town Monsters, and Seth Breedlove made this Bray Road Beast movie that came out. You can watch it on Amazon now, I think Prime, even I think. And Linda's in it, and my friend Jay Bachoshin's in it a lot. But they talk about, it's this idea that maybe the Beast of Bray Road wasn't just some kind of weird animal or a dog or a wolf that could walk on two legs, but that it might be some kind of creature brought forth, that's some kind of, and
like Native American whatever.
Right. But or something brought over through a portal.
Right.
And what I think is interesting about that is because you go back to the early 1990s. And so, like I said, I grew up very near Bray Road. And in this town called Mukwonago, which is where I went to high school, in Mukwonago, we had a place called the Rainbow Springs Hotel. And Rainbow Springs Hotel never opened. It was built in the 1960s. And it was supposed to be like a resort. It had a golf course. The golf course eventually opened. But they built this giant hotel, a beautiful place, and the developer ended up running out of money, and he killed himself.
Absolutely.
And so then you have this property developed. This hotel is never completed, never opened, but the hotel's still up there. And the land is still there. So eventually they opened a golf course, and they used to run a haunted house, like the local charity, JC's, would run a haunted house every Halloween out of the hotel. But the thing is, the people who worked at the haunted house said, it's not just a haunted house. This hotel is really haunted. And they would talk about the unusual experiences they would have inside the Rainbow Springs Hotel. It'd be shadow people. It'd be touched. It'd be, people would just be terrified and have these weird experiences. They were already working at a haunted house, but there was a haunted house instead of a real haunted house. And so in the early 90s, I knew a guy who worked at the golf course. And he's like, I can get you in the hotel. And in the middle of winter, he gets us, me and another guy, into the hotel, and we do like a tour of it. And it's amazing. Like, you walk into these rooms where you see the coaxial cable sticking out of the wall. And like, there's a bed, there's a chair, there's everything that should be a hotel. There's the telephone wire, everything. Sorry, I just bumped my mic. But so you see this place, and it's amazing, and it's fascinating, and it's like Life After People, if you remember that show, because it's wintertime, so snow has gotten in through some of the broken windows. You go into a place that was supposed to be a ballroom, and it's full of snow. And then you're seeing this ballroom that's full of snow, and it just looks like this abandoned post-apocalyptic thing that you're walking into. We walk into one room, and there's somebody drew a pentagram on the floor in chalk. and killed a chicken. Like there is a chicken body, like chicken guts and head and everything on the floor. And so you walk into a room and actually see that someone had done a animal sacrifice in this room. And we see this, that freaks us out a little bit. I just thought, I didn't think it was haunted at all. I wanted to see ghosts. I thought, man, these are kids that listen to too many, and I was a big Ozzy fan. I've seen Ozzy like 6 times. But I was like, man, these are kids that seen too many Ozzy, that like heavy metal too much or whatever, and take shout at the devil for real. And they did, that's silly. And I think it's ridiculous. And then we hear something like a sound in the other room, and then we turn our flashlights off, and then we're stuck in the ritual room for a few minutes. We're like, oh, what if they're still here? Because the blood's still on the floor. So somebody else was in the hotel that night. Okay, so we're like hiding, and then eventually the police come by, and then we're hiding from the police and hiding from whoever did the sacrifice. But I didn't think it was paranormal. I just thought it was natural. Skip to a year later. We're in an abandoned farmhouse where people said that weird stuff had happened. So we're at this abandoned farmhouse in the same town, and I got about 10 people with me, and we're going to the abandoned farmhouse, and like the roof is ripped off and the walls are kind of open. We go in this one room, we put down a Ouija board, and this girl sits down with the Ouija board. Then I go down to it, and then one of my friends walks in from the other room, and he throws something on the Ouija board, and he goes, "Here, use this as an antenna." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It's a bone, because there are animal bones shoved in the wall of this place. Now, I'm thinking, this whole time, I don't think any of this is paranormal. I'm like, whatever. Like, kids are bored. Farm kids are bored. And what are they doing? Farm kids are bored. They're doing stupid stuff. And then when I watch the Beast of Bray Road thing, you hear about the animal control officer in Walworth County, which is just, we're in Waukesha County. So it's one county over.
Right.
The animal control officer talks about all the animal like sacrifices he had seen right before the Beast of Bray Road. And here I am 15 miles away and seeing animal sacrifices that I didn't think were paranormal at all. But I'm just like, it made me look at those things in a new light of the experiences we had in Mukwonago, that, okay, someone was performing animal sacrifices there. And I thought it was kids being stupid, but maybe not. The satanic panic is real. I always thought it was a lie.
You never know. I mean, I've been a skeptic of a lot of things. So when we did this private home investigation, and we couldn't explain half the shit that happened there. And we still can't explain some of it. There was this old shed. It's a 95-year-old house in Grafton.
Okay.
And there was this old shed out back. My wife took like 2 quick pictures of it while we were downstairs in the basement. And the next thing you know, there's one picture's clear, the other one's got a ghost. People see things in the windows. But when we actually went inside the shed and investigated it, and the owner didn't know anything about anything else except that there was a few writings on it. But what I noticed first was that there was a fire in that shed. So something did happen there at some point, because the window was clearly covered with smoke, and that was fire damage. But to see the smoke before we even went in to find out that there was a fire there, we had no idea there was a fire inside that shed. But then that picture shows smoke, and it's coming out from the bottom of the door. Nobody was drilling, and nobody was burning leaves or anything down the door. It caused smoke, and nobody was smoking cigarettes.
Oh man, that's pretty cool. Well, that fire kind of thing, that makes me think about the Newhall House in Milwaukee, which is now the Hilton Garden Inn, and you can still see the fire damage on the side of the building from a fire that happened in 1883.
Wow.
And it's At the time, it was the worst hotel fire in American history. Like with how many people died? Like 72 people died. General Tom Thumb was there. One of P.T. Barnum's, like the dwarf, like he was there. Like, and they saved him. You know, like he had jumped out into a net or whatever. But a lot of people died in this horrible fire. And eventually the Newhall House was rebuilt. It's a hotel for a while. Now it's Hilton Garden Inn. And there's a particular room where people have had experiences. And one night, Allison, my sister, and I, and her husband Scott, we all go stay in the room. It's like a more of a suite type room, so it's a little bigger. And we stayed on an off night, so we didn't pay an outrageous price to downtown Milwaukee. But so we're there, and we bring out the ghost gear, and we're not getting anything. You know, we get the EMF meters, we get the EVPs, we're doing everything we can to try to invoke some kind of spirit. Because the thing is, we heard stories. One of the stories is a guy checks into the room, goes in, puts his clothes, then leaves, then comes back, and he hears what sounds like, people talking, activity, like bustling in the room. And he's like, what the hell's going on? And he can't move. He tries to get in. He can't unlock the door. Like, and he has to open the door. He tries to use his key. It won't work. And he just hears all this activity. He calls the front desk. Front desk comes up. They hear it too. The manager comes in. He's like, hold on, we'll get this going. And, they use the key, try to screw with it. Can't get in. All of a sudden, the sound stops. The activity stops. Puts the key in, and they can go in. And there's nobody in there. This guy's thinking there's a party in his room. They're saying we're gonna have to call the police because you're in somebody's room, and there's nobody in the room. And there's the video footage, there's nobody going into the room or anything like that. But the manager heard that, the guy heard that, and we're like, we got to stay in that room. So we go stay in the room, and nothing's happening. In the middle of the night, not the middle of the night, but like midnight, I go down to the bar. And I'm talking to the bartender, seeing if I can get any kind of stories or anything like that. Because that's the best stories you get aren't from the management, because the management's always going to give you the corporate bullshit line.
Yeah, they want money.
That's their job. It's not their job to tell you ghost stories. That's our job. It's their job to get people to stay at the hotel. I get it.
Yeah. Best way you can.
Right. And so I told the bartender. The bartender's like, well, I haven't heard too much. And I'm like, okay. So then I just walk up to the front desk girl. And she's bored. There's nothing going on. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm just like, hey, we're staying in this room, blah, blah, blah. And I heard there's some ghost story. And she's like, yeah, that room especially. She's like, have you seen anything tonight? I'm like, no. She goes, most of the time people don't see anything. But she's like, a couple of months ago, I was working. And a woman came down and said there was like an animal in the closet. She could hear all this activity happening in the closet. So she was scared and came down and had us go up. We went up and checked. There was nothing there. So we said it must be just some kind of weird sounds, and we apologize. It's an old building. And then she's like, fine. So the management, the night girl comes back down, and then the woman who's staying in the room goes back up. 5 minutes later, they get a call again. She's like, there's too much activity in my room. Things are moving around. The sounds are like, there's something in there. They go back up and check. Like, the woman's been now back downstairs. And then she's like, okay, you stay here. I'll go check. She goes, there's nothing when she goes to check. Comes back down and tells the woman, I'm sorry, we can't move you to another room. I went up there. I didn't see anything. We can't move you to another room because the place is full. So there's, the woman, instead of going back to the room, she slept on the couch in the lobby rather than go back to the room. And she still paid for a night. She still paid for a night and slept on the couch instead of going back to the room. That's how scared she was of it. And I'm like, where else? You're not going to get that story from the manager. Oh, yeah, we let people sleep in the lobby. But you're going to get it from the front desk girl who's like, let me tell you, like, I've seen some shit. Okay, that's the kind of stuff you want. And that's what makes it fun. The investigation, the talking to people, it's getting the stories from the people who are on the ground. It's talking to the cooks who work in the kitchen. It's talking to the waitresses and the bartenders and the people who don't.
They're by themselves at night.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, the people that are closing the place up.
Yeah.
Who's closing up? Talk to the people who are closing up. I want to talk to them. You know, some of the best stories in Madison I got were from the guy who used to clean the Orpheum in the middle of the night. Like, so once the Orpheum closed, it was his job to go in there and clean the bathrooms, clean the projection booths, and he said when I got a job there, they said, don't be surprised if you hear the night manager. And he's like, who's the night manager? Like, I'm the night janitor. Who's the night manager? Like, no, it's what we call the ghost who walks through the main hall so the Orpheum has two different theaters. And there's a long hallway between the theaters, between the main theater, which seats about 1,200 people, and this theater in the back, which seats maybe 300 or 400 people.
Yeah,
and
very old building too.
Yes, built in 1928, I think. And so he was going. They said, like, don't worry, you just hear the night manager come through, and then you'll hear the jingling of his keys, and you'll hear his footsteps, and don't worry, he's not going to bother you. He said the person that's going to bother you is the projectionist in the old movie booth. Like, what? So in the back theater, on the projection booth, that's where he liked to clean the least, because that's where he nicknamed him Pete. He doesn't know if it actually was Pete. And the urban legend that went through the theater was that Pete had killed himself. That's all. He killed himself inside the projection booth, and that's why he was bothering him. But like, Pete would hide things on him. Pete would hide things on projectionists. Like, they looked for the second reel of the movie. They couldn't find the second reel of the movie because Pete would hide it. Like, and they would never find it till the last minute or whatever. Like, he played tricks on him, and all those type of things. And you're not going to, like, the manager might have some good stories, and the person that managed the Orpheum, she went on to work at the Sundance Theater, but she was there for 20 years. And I got a couple of stories from her, but the great stories of the people. Like, I had to be here all night, 5 days a week, and let me tell you what I saw. And that's when you get the best ghost stories from the people that had to live there, had to work there, and their paycheck was more important than their fear.
Yeah, I used to work at a place that they always said was haunted. I've seen a lot of stuff. I was able to debunk most of it, but I was a security supervisor at Railback when it sat on that right where Winnebago and Milwaukee Street now.
Okay.
And that place was like built in like 1848 or something. 1800s. It was a very old building. But it was like a farmhouse, it was all opened up. So you had this barn that went this way, all the doors were open. And you'd have all kinds of things, squirrels, possums, all kinds of stuff running around in the rafters, bats all over the place, right? I was a supervisor. I had to hire people there to work there as security at this one gal determined to work there. I'm sitting there in bed, and I lived right across the street. 3 o'clock in the morning, she starts crawling, screaming and crying and freaking out, saying there's this ghost. She swears he's a ghost of Railback, and he's dressed in a Confederate soldier uniform, and he's got her cornered in the back. And I'm like, okay, I'll be right there. So I had to get up out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, mind you, I forgot, and I didn't think about it. I had a camouflage t-shirt on. I just put on my jeans, and I had my own key to the place because I was security supervisor. So I walked right in there, and I found her, and she freaked out even more because she thought I was the ghost at first. But I used to hear people saying that they heard noises, but I was always able to debunk the noises because I tell you what, I did piss my pants in that place, and I don't admit that too often, but I was walking. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm walking through one of the buildings that's wide open to the outside, and as I'm walking through, this fucking squirrel comes off the rafter and jumps right on my back.
A squirrel.
Yeah, it came out of the rafters. Something must have startled him up there, and he just boom, jumped right down onto my back and we ran out the door. And it's like, dude, I freaked. I saw him go too, and it's like, you son of a bitch.
That's well. I mean, things like debunking. I think is an important part.
But there was always stories about some kind of veteran soldier ghost going on, and I don't know if that was the employees just screwing with people that worked there, or if it was actually true. I never was able. I wasn't into the paranormal then. I was too much involved in the security work that I was doing.
Sure.
Look into it much, and by the time I got to look into it, Railback's gone.
Right. Well, Wisconsin. I mean, we do have at Camp Randall there, and so I haven't heard of a particular Confederate ghost in that area now, in Winnebago and Milwaukee, which is, I mean,
I don't even know what
four blocks or whatever from where I am, right? But because I'm on right off Atwood, but we do have Confederate ghosts in Madison. So you're talking about Forest Hill Cemetery. Forest Hill Cemetery had Confederate rest,
right,
which is the northernmost Confederate cemetery in the United States. So Wisconsin was part of the Union, right? The part of the northern part of and then there was no Civil War battles fought in Wisconsin. Why do we have a Confederate cemetery? Because at Camp Randall, which Camp Randall now, it has the stadium, it hosts the Badger games. If it's 80,000 people and it's always sold out. I mean, we'll see what happens with Badger games in the future, but last year there's 80,000 screaming people at Camp Randall. People see Confederate soldiers at Camp Randall because it was the northernmost prisoner of war camp during the Civil War.
I did not know that.
And so
I did not know that.
Yeah, so Camp Randall was it was a military outfit back in 1860s. Wisconsin became a state in 1848. And Madison wasn't the original capital. Belmont, Wisconsin was the original capital. And then so this is like all while they're building the capital in Madison. And then Camp Randall, before it was a big stadium, was a military encampment, and that's where they kept the Confederate soldiers. And there was a massive sickness that came through. I'm not sure if it was a flu or dysentery or what happened, but the report of Camp Randall as a prisoner of war camp was shameful. And so the conditions that the POWs were in were horrible, and like 150 soldiers died. Confederate soldiers died at Camp Randall. So the idea of seeing a Confederate soldier walking through a town that never had a Civil War battle, it's because we had the POWs. And so people have seen in the field house and at Camp Randall Stadium, people have seen the vision of a Confederate soldier walking by, and they have no idea why. They're like, why the hell would there be a Confederate soldier in a football stadium?
Most of them were buried over there in Forest Hill.
Yes, in Forest Hill at Confederate rest,
right.
which was a big deal last year because in the 1920s or whatever, the Daughters of the Confederacy, a group put a thing honoring the Civil War soldiers,
right.
Those Confederate soldiers. And they were like, they thought it was honoring the Confederacy, so they changed it up, and then they disturbed the monument last year. Has that added to any kind of paranormal activity of people seeing things at Forest Hill? I'm not sure.
Right.
I used to run through there. I lived on the west side, and for a while, and so I used to run down Mineral Point Road, down to Speedway, and then you'd run through the cemetery.
Yeah, run the clock course first.
And it's a nice place. And Chris Farley's buried. He's buried in Resurrection across the street.
Right.
Because there's Resurrection Cemetery and then there's Forest Hill, but they're both next to each other.
Right. They're right across the street from each other, basically.
Right. And they do historical tours there, like during Halloween. They'll do like the famous dead people buried in Resurrection or Forest Hill will do something there. But so yes, so the fact that a Civil War soldier on the east side of Madison, we had Confederate soldiers on the east side of Madison at one time. So are they watching some kind of recording, or is it some kind of residual haunting?
Yeah, residual.
So that makes it interesting that we have different reports from different people of Confederate ghosts in Madison. So that's great. That's something new. Yeah. And so I like that, especially since you didn't realize about the POW camp. That makes it really interesting to me.
I had no idea about that, but I knew about the cemetery because, like I said, I pretty much grew up right across from the Fort.
Sure.
I mean, why not? I mean, look how big it was. I had a go-kart once and got busted for driving it around. Where else are you going to drive a go-kart?
Right. Right. There's little roads in there.
Yeah, exactly. I was having a heyday. I wasn't disturbing nothing, but you can't do that no more.
Of course not.
So, but see, my family grew up in that side. Most of them are from that area, so I know a lot of history about that particular area, but I know about it as the Greenbush neighborhood.
Oh, sure.
Okay, where it was one big, huge Italian community. So that's why I know that much about that side of Madison, because I've done so much research into that.
Sure. Well, I mean, we still have the Italian Working Man's Club.
Right, on Regent Street there.
So, I mean,
Gosie's is gone, and now it's some college, whatever you call it, high-rise.
Right. I mean, Madison's different now than it used to be, even when I came to college here in the 1990s.
Yeah. Madison was so much different and so much better back in the 70s and the 80s, I'll tell you.
Well, I still enjoyed it. Like we always said, so my entire band, we're all from the Milwaukee area. We came to college in Madison. We liked it so much we never left.
Right. I saw that.
I moved to La Crosse for a couple of years for a job. I worked at a TV station there. Like during one of the mysterious disappearances in the Mississippi River, the whole, I had never heard of the La Crosse serial killer. The idea that someone was drowning young men. My mother had known about it because she knew I liked the party. And so she's like, or just, drink or whatever, because I'm in a band, I'm a musician, you have a few beers. But she's like, be careful in La Crosse because someone's killing young men. And I moved there when I was 23. And so I was only there for a couple of years. And then I moved to Minneapolis for a couple of years too. But then something draws me back to Madison, and it's a beautiful place with a fascinating history and great places for ghost investigations. Places like the Orpheum, the Majestic. Speaking of Madison, I think I told this story to someone the other day because they were wondering what kind of ghost stories I really like, or what's my favorite. And I'm like, I don't know if I have any favorite ghost stories because I love them all, but they're the ones that connect with different people who maybe aren't interested in this kind of thing or who aren't researched. When you find similar kind of stories between people, like you said, like you didn't realize there's a POW camp, but there's a Confederate soldier. Okay, now that connects to a different ghost story I heard. I was talking to somebody about the Majestic Theater. And this was at a music conference. We were in Chicago a few years back. And so this girl, she was an intern at the Majestic, and she was like helping design their posters for shows and stuff. And we're hanging out at the music conference and having a beer or something. And she goes, okay, I heard somebody here told me you like ghost stories. And I'm like, well, yeah, I like ghost stories. And this is before we had the podcast or everything. So I just had kind of gone around that I like ghost stories. And so she goes, what do you know about the Majestic Theater? Now, the Majestic Theater, I've done a bunch of research on, and we have it it's featured on our Madison tour. And the Majestic Theater, built in 1907.
I know that's one. I know that was another old one. Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, super old. And it was, a vaudeville theater back before movies, and then they featured movies. Then like it becomes like a porn theater for a while, which is weird because it's so close to the Capitol. But I mean, Times Square in New York, man, if you go to Times Square in New York, like when I went in the 80s, is not like the family friendly Times Square you get today when you go. And so, and then in the 90s, when I come to college, they have Rocky Horror there. And so Saturday nights, you go see Rocky Horror at the Majestic. It was awesome. And now it's a music venue. It was a club for a while. And so anyway, but she's asking me about it. And first of all, I think that one of the most interesting stories I heard about the Majestic isn't just about the weird person that people see in the balcony. It's the guy that used to stage manage the Rocky Horror Picture Show was willing to like do an interview and talk about what he saw. And he said that they always thought it was the ghost of the green room. When they would get prepared and they get dressed and everything like that, like the ghost would mess with the girls, play with their hair, whisper in their ear, tickle them. All these kind of things where the girls were bothered by the ghost and didn't usually bother the guys. And he said the last night of Rocky Horror, which was maybe 99, 2000, I can't remember. He said he's walking out of the green room as everybody's on stage already. He's the last one to leave, but turn off the light. And he feels a whisper in his ear. Good luck with this show. And he's like, that's it. I didn't go back in there after that. But he told me the stories about what the girls had experienced. And so when I asked this intern, I'm like, okay, so what have you experienced? Or what do you know about the Majestic? She goes, well, I can tell you, I don't like going in the girls' restroom because in the girls' restroom, I feel like something's watching me. I feel like I'm alone. The girls' restroom makes me feel uncomfortable. It definitely makes me feel like it's haunted. And I'm just thinking that's funny because when they redid the Majestic as a music venue, the old dressing room, which was under the stage, became the girls' bathroom. Okay. So you get something 20 years apart, maybe not 20, like 16 years apart. You get someone in the exact same place, a girl experiencing uncomfortableness at some kind of ghost that's playing with the girls in the bathroom in the exact same place that 15 years before the girls had that kind of experience in the green room before the Rocky Horror shows. And that's my favorite kind of story because you get two people from different time zones, different frameworks, everything, periods, where the exact same place, they have similar types of experiences. That is interesting to me because she didn't go in expecting, she heard about the ghost in the balcony. She didn't know about the ghost in the girls' room. And that makes it really interesting to me.
Yeah, it does when you find things out that you don't know. I'm still learning. We just started this last year, so we're still learning. But, like I said, that private house thing, that place kind of freaked me out a bit. We saw orbs on some of the footage. We had a raid in an attic that moved for I think it was 16 minutes nonstop. We had a camera up there while we were in the rest of the house. And nobody was up there. There was no wind, nothing. That attic. But this thing with this big ass weight just kept swinging back and forth. And sometimes it was like speed.
And it's those little things, right? It's the stuff that you can't explain that makes it all worthwhile.
Oh yeah. It does. And then it's the fun stuff when you got your partner and something happens to you because you're not, you're sitting there, you're walking cautiously. Sanatorium Hill, for example. I was walking cautiously, and you're walking through, and it's not too far from Cherokee Marsh.
No.
It's called Cherokee Marsh, yeah. I get the marshes a little confused sometimes where they are. Cherokee Marshes are too far from the sanatorium now. So we're walking through there, and all of a sudden, me, not really paying too much attention to what's down by my feet, almost stumbled upon a deer, and thing gets up and startles the hell out of me, and they never left. So that made it for a fun night, even though we didn't see anything. That alone just made it.
Yeah, it's a cool experience.
The rest of them just couldn't let me leave it down because I'm the one that got spooked.
Sure.
By a small little deer of all things, but it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, and there is an adrenaline aspect to paranormal investigation. I mean, I think that's why people like ghost adventures. I think that's why those guys like ghost adventures. Like, Zach Baggins, sometimes you see him and you're like, oh my God. But you can tell that what they like is the adrenaline rush when they get some kind of, and I can see that with a lot of people that go on investigations, that they want that little, like the EVP, that feeling, that that roller coaster feeling. It is exciting and it's fun.
But it still can be just as fun because you learn about things, you learn a little bit of history of the area. I like it for that. It's you learn things you don't know about an area that's lived around forever. In my case, because we're pretty much just covering Wisconsin right now. So you learn the history of a small town that you've never really been to. And then you get to see some of these places you might not see without getting involved in this.
Yeah, it's a connection to the place. You feel connected to a building or the land or learning about the history and understanding why these creating a narrative out of a ghost story.
Right.
Right. When you say like, okay, we think it's this person that lived here that died in the house, and we have this kind of evidence that supports that this is the person we're speaking to because it's a name we got on the EVP or from the Ovulus or something. And then going back to connecting it to different pieces of the history. That's what makes it exciting. And I enjoy the narrative creation out of it a lot. I mean, there's so much when you're staying, you're sitting in a investigating a place and you're there for 8 hours to just get these little bits of evidence, and you're there all day or all night and you're like, oh man. But it's like one thread that connects from a name to a person, to maybe a gravestone, to then maybe a piece of evidence like a even Ouija board or something like that. That you're like, hey man, we got this. So I'm with you. I'm gonna have to go in a minute though.
Yeah, we're gonna.
It's already. I didn't realize it's already 5 o'clock.
Yeah, we've done our hour. So thank you for coming on. I got to get ready.
Oh, happy to be here.
We're going to be doing a half-hour podcast tomorrow, live on the Wisconsin Podcast Association website.
Cool.
Facebook page to raise money for Wisconsin, to feed Wisconsin families. Is what this is going to be for. It's a big podcast tomorrow. We've got a 30-minute spot for that.
Nice. Well, good luck with that.
And if you guys want to check this guy out, check out Sunspot on YouTube, and they've got some good music. And See You on the
Appreciate
Other Side podcast is a very good one. I mean, I really did like the Manson episode, by the way. I was
right on. Right on. We actually recorded
our older stuff to kind of get a feel for it.
We recorded a Charles Manson song for that episode, so you had to do a deep cut to actually like go in there and record a song written by the guy himself. But that's part of it, exploring it through the music and everything. Right. That's part of what we do.
Yeah, check them out. It's really cool. So,
thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much for coming on, Mike. You have a good day and have a good weekend. And you guys all be sure to check us out at otherthansaneproductions.com, and we'll see you tomorrow and then next week.
Very good. Haunt you again.